Remember this, the customer pays for everything. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's installment of our book review series, this is going to be number 19, we're going to be addressing in part 5, the cost of acquisition, and that's going to be on page 68. So let's make an early distinction between there being a cost of finance and the cost of acquisition of finance. Okay, so let's make that distinction. The cost of acquiring finance is going to be both in time and money, and time is going to play a very significant part. Nash opens this by relating a study from an article about 7 people being necessary to buy a $17 hammer. So perhaps 7 people walk by this hammer. The 7th person is the one that buys the hammer for $17. But if you evaluated the time of what it took to be able to get 7 people to walk by that hammer, that equated to $100. So for sure, there is a cost to acquire finance. And then finance itself has a cost. So time and money, that's no strange thought, I don't think, to any of us, are going to be the elemental factors into this equation, time and money. It will require both of them. So the two factors in this particular method of conventional finance, which is credit, debt, is time and money. If you see that line right in the middle, that's showing 0, okay? And to go into debt means you go below that line, and then you amortize or you pay off or you dig your way out of that over time. So, of course, as that line moves forward, time is passing by. So time is passing by, and money is going into paying off that debt, paying off that credit. In the other method of conventional finance, which is the cash method, you, over time, of course, build up from 0. You start from scratch. You build up from 0, and you build to the point to where you have what it is that you need for what it is that you want, and you liquidate those funds going back down to 0. And then, of course, the time must also start back over. So those are the two conventional ways to finance. So surely, right there you see there is a cost to finance itself. So that's just me trying to demonstrate the cost of finance. But there is furthermore a cost of acquisition of finance. And Nash gives some further examples. I have actually read this book. I was very pleased when I was rereading this book, Becoming Your Own Banker, when I got to page 68, to see that I had read this book by the time that I was rereading. So I guess I would have been rereading Becoming Your Own Banker in 2023, because I read this book that he references, which is called Iacocca, and that's the name of Lee Iacocca. That's the last name of a man who came in on the Chrysler business when it was in a crisis. And the whole story, of course, is about Lee's life, about Iacocca's life. But of course, a lot of that is involved with Chrysler and the turnaround and everything that went into that. And there was a great example right there of showing that a lot of time, and a lot of money just went into Chrysler being able to acquire the finance necessary to even try to turn itself around. And it's just really interesting. So I read that book and I had some takeaways from it myself. It's one of the suggested readings then that you can find from Becoming Your Own Banker, of course. I would encourage you to check it out. I think it's one of the things I enjoy doing in the evenings is I'm typically in the evening time. This is just me. You might be different. I try to turn off the analytical side of my brain a bit. And it's nice to read about John Adams, or it's nice to read about Lee Iacocca, read about somebody else's life, because I feel like I can still learn from other people's mistakes and learn from other people's advantages, but also have a pleasurable time while doing it. And that was a good read for me, so I would encourage you to check it out. But it's a great example of how it took months and years just to be able to acquire the finance for Chrysler that it would need to even try to turn the business around that had gone south horribly. And that's what Nash is trying to point out right here, is that Finance has a cost, but furthermore, there is a cost just to be able to acquire finance. And there's a huge distinction to make. Let me give you another example. This is just from my own thoughts. If we were to go out and eat at a restaurant and we order a meal and we finish and we're paying for that meal, think about this. And I know you'll realize this if you just do give the time to think about it, but we wouldn't normally, because we think that we're paying for that plate of those particular food items that we ate. And we are, but we're not just doing that, are we? We're paying for the table that we ate that food on. We're paying for the chair from which we ate that food. We're paying for the air conditioning in that room. We're paying the taxes. We're paying the light bill. We're paying the distribution mechanism, whatever it looks like, to be able to get the raw supplies to that restaurant, etc. The list goes on and on. I'm not in the restaurant business, but the list goes on and on. And what was the time associated with all of that being put into place for us to be able to enjoy that one plate of food at that one particular moment? So there's a lot of time and money that goes into acquiring whatever it is. Okay. That plate of food. So we're paying not just for that plate of food, but for everything else. So remember this, and this is also from the Becoming Your Own Baker book, that the consumer, the customer, pays for everything. Let's go back to that Chrysler story. And I can't even remember if I'm just asking this from the book. Maybe Nash even already asked this. I could double check, but that's the beauty of, he gets us to thinking. So I'll share my thought that just jumped in my mind. Who was it that was going to really end up paying back the government loans that Chrysler got to turn their business around? The consumer, the future purchasers of Chrysler vehicles were going to be the people that were going to pay for that acquisition of finance. The consumer, the customer, please hear me on this. Realize this for yourself. Moving forward for the rest of your life, we pay for everything. We do. We pay for everything. So it's going to be the future purchasers of Chrysler vehicles that we're going to end up paying for all of that cost of acquisition. Chrysler going to the banks, Chrysler going to the federal government, Chrysler making these government-backed loans happen. The consumer was going to pay for that. Now, Nash does particularly point out how nonprofits experience this, because, of course, nonprofits are completely reliant on the donations or contributions of folks that are interested or involved. And he points out how even the most conservative nonprofits spend about 15% to get a dollar. So they would spend about 15 cents to be able to get a new dollar in contributions. So something, of course, money-wise and time-wise, and we'll circle back to time here in just a moment, has to go into getting new dollars, new contributions, new donations. And he said more typically it could be 85%, meaning 85 cents being spent by a nonprofit organization to get another new $1 contributed. But it's going to be something regardless. And that's what this chapter is all about. It's just pointing out the fact that it exists. There just is a cost to the acquisition of capital, to finance. Now, let's talk about that time, because it's probably the most underappreciated. It's the most under-recognized aspect of the equation. I know money is forefront in so many people's minds, and it's so very relevant, no question about it. But think about the finite nature of time. Money is not necessarily finite. We can create more, earn more, but time we can't get back. So with time being the finite resource, I think we should put even more importance on that aspect of this entire equation. But now that brings us to the contrast. What we've talked about so far is conventional finance. When someone has begun the infinite banking concept, when they've actually implemented it in their lives, there is no cost of acquisition of finance. The entity already exists. the entity is already owned, controlled, in place, in force. I mean, that mutual life insurance company has given you a whole life insurance policy that pays a dividend, and it's a piece of private property that you own for your whole life. So there's no more cost of acquisition of finance. You have the ultimate financing entity. You have the ideal asset for privatizing your banking, for privatizing your finance. So there's no cost of acquisition now. Now, sure, there can be additions to your system, meaning you could be buying more of these whole life insurance policies from mutual companies that pay dividends. You could be adding to your system, just like, for example, commercial banks open up multiple branches. The banks have opened up branches in my town. They have them in your town and all over. So there is cost of acquisition for a new policy, for a new privatized banking entity. But when you have one, there's now no future cost of acquisition, which again, if you just think about what that one example was from Nash's book, are folks spending 15%? Are they spending 85% for the cost of acquisition? Yes, they are. But when you have a policy, you are no longer spending anything, time or money, to acquire that ability to finance. It's just a matter of growing and scaling at that point, which means that if you're not spending any time to acquire finance, let me give you an example. I was recently having an interview on the podcasting channel with Will from the Cash Compounds office, and he was telling me about some real estate deals. So he had a builder that came to him and asked him if he was interested in putting up some money for a project. We knew the guy. That opportunity presented itself. Will was already in a position, because he owned a policy, to be able to say yes or no to that deal that presented itself to him. There was no time involved where he had to go and talk with the loan officer from a bank or anything else like that. So he'd already put in the time and the money to be able to acquire the ability to finance. And he just got to say yes or no. He said yes, and it was profitable. He told me a great story, and I would encourage you to check out that information, that interview that I had with Will, where he's talking about that. But that's just one example where when time is of the essence, if you already have one of these policies and you've been proactively building capital there, aren't you better positioned for opportunities because of the time and the money that you've put into building a privatized banking system? Absolutely. Of course. And when you recognize that you are in a marketplace potentially competing against other folks who certainly will be having to account for the acquisition of capital, you can move in a much more timely manner. You can move with speed that they cannot, because you already have the ability to finance something, because you've acquired that ability to finance something. So you're working on different time frames moving forward. You're working on different cost bases because you've already accounted for the cost of acquisition. It's done, it's set, it's established, and you're the one who's actually controlling the banking function in your life. And again, whether that's for your household, whether that's for a business growing and scaling and operating a business, are there hardships that pop up? Sure, absolutely. Do you want to be having to try and acquire the ability to finance whatever that hardship is, or are you going to be better positioned if you've proactively done that for yourself? And then on the other hand, if it's not a hardship, is it an opportunity? What if you could be positioned to take advantage of an opportunity because you'd already put in the time and the money to acquire the ability to finance the opportunities that will present themselves? Remember the golden rule. Nash says, he who has the gold makes the rules. And when you have capital, opportunities will hunt you down, to use his words. Since we are doing a book review right here, let's do that. And I would say, remember this. I've often heard James Nethery remind us of what we all know, which is that the future is unknown. There will be hardships. That Chrysler story, they experienced a hardship. There will be also opportunities. That recent interview that I was telling you about with Will and real estate opportunities, there will be hardships. There will be opportunities. The future is unknown. So doesn't it behoove us then to consider this one particular aspect from this one chapter in the book, that there is a cost of acquisition? And if we will proactively address that by becoming our own banker, by implementing this infinite banking concept, then when addressing that unknown future that will have hardships and opportunities, won't we have more control? Won't we have more of an opportunity for profitability? Yes, we will. So if that interests you and you'd like to have a conversation, then you can reach my full introductory presentation on the website and my calendar link, where we could have a conversation about what it could look like for you to implement infinite banking into your household, into your business, into your investing. You can find me at durhamtalents.com. This has been an absolute pleasure for me. I hope you have a great day. Take care. The future is unknown.
Unknown.
More of an opportunity for profitability.
Profitability.